Hey there people, how are you doing? So today we are going to compare the video quality that we can get out of the S20 versus the Mi 10. It's time to see if the flagship can truly live up to his name, or will the underdog take over? Alright, so this is a selfie video test on the Mi 10 and the S20 Plus. The Mi 10 can record only up to 1080p 30. That's pretty disappointing to be honest, because compared to that, the S20 can do up to 4K at 60. Now, okay, I understand that 60 FPS on the front camera, it's not really required to be honest, but yeah, look, 4K, I would have expected that much, at least. But we don't really have that here, it's unfortunate. But anyways, I'll let you know how it exactly looks in a few moments. And I also forgot about the selfie camera pictures on the last photo comparison that I did between these two. So they'll be coming up soon as well. Alright, so for the audio quality, I definitely think that the Mi 10 could be a little bit better, especially in terms of noise reduction, because the S20 handles the background noise much better in my opinion. But on the other hand, the voice is definitely very clear on both. As for image quality, I definitely think the S20 manages the contrast levels much better than the Mi 10, because the Mi 10 is crushing the shadows and kind of overexposing my face quite a bit. Alright, now for those infamous selfies that I missed out before, the first one, I definitely believe that the Mi 10 looks quite a bit better because the higher contrast really makes the contours of my face stand out a little bit more. The S20 feels kind of flat to me. But for the second one, I think the contrast is a little too high. It's overexposing my face in some places, while the S20 manages to balance it out much better. And the third one, it's once again better on the Mi 10 because I think that it maintains the colors on my skin much better. Well, the S20 has this sort of a green tint, which is making me look kind of sick. But trust me, I'm not. For this clip, I think the stabilization is pretty similar on both. It goes back and forth a little, but the contrast levels really make the green stand out quite a bit on the Mi 10, while the S20, it looks a little bit faded to my eyes. Of course, it's personal preference here. If you like the faded look, then definitely the S20 is the one to go for. But I personally prefer the contrast levels, specifically on this one. Alright, now for some super steady video. Here, I think that the contrast is a little too high and it's even crushing the shadows a little bit on the Mi 10. As for stabilization, it's again very similar, but you have to keep in mind that the Mi 10 crops in a lot more than the S20 does. Although, I do feel that the colors are a little bit more vibrant on the Mi 10. Okay, so Valentine is back, as you can see, and here, I do feel like the contrast levels are quite a bit low on the S20 as compared to the Mi 10. And I would have preferred the Mi 10 if the exposure was just a little bit higher. It's really crushing the shadows here, which kind of makes Valentine as a subject look unappealing. But then for this 8K clip, I absolutely prefer the Mi 10 because here the exposure isn't lacking and the extra contrast and vibrance really makes Valentine stand out as a subject. I mean, I gotta admit, Valentine looks really nice on the Mi 10, while on the S20 it feels kind of faded. Alright, this one is really interesting to say the least. It's a focusing test for the Mi 10 in pretty harsh backlit lighting, and well, see for yourself what happens. We have our foreground and it's not focusing, and there it focused. There's that. It stopped. Once more, we'll try it. And there we go. Hey, it's time to party. But yes, I tried it again, and this time I used tap to focus with hopes of better results. Well, they were in vain, because tap to focus locked the focusing completely and it didn't even focus on the foreground. I did try it a third time. And we're back to square one. And now, let me show you why the S20 is a flagship. Just look at that focusing, it's perfect. It's really harsh backlit conditions, and even that dynamic range is so much better on the S20. Not to mention, obviously, the focusing. It's just lightning fast. Okay, so this time I tried much better conditions, and I have to admit, this focusing is pretty insane on the Mi 10. It's, literally lunging for a focus. It's the jerkiest focusing that I've ever seen to date. As for the S20, in my opinion, it's got a much more smoother transition between the foreground and background when focusing. But when you switch over to 8K, well, the whole thing turns upside down. because the S20 not only does it crop in a lot, it also uses the secondary 64 megapixel camera, which, well, it really cannot focus. But when you switch over to the Mi 10 with 8K, well, not only does it use the primary sensor with a much wider field of view, the focusing is, well, it's the same as 4K, but it's definitely better than the S20 in 8K. You can see I'm gradually closing in, and even then the focusing is still really jerky, but, well, at least it's doing its job. That's enough to appreciate, especially in 8K. Switching over to slow motion, here we have the S20 coming in at 1080p 240fps, and honestly it looks really nice. The shadows are really well exposed. It's pretty harsh conditions, to be honest. The light is directly in front of the camera, but even then it's able to expose the shadows really well. There is grain, but honestly it's a pretty good quality slow-mo. The Mi 10 on the other hand, well, the shadows are absolutely crushed, and not to mention, it cannot even do 1080p 240, it's stuck at 120Hz. That's a very bad software limitation, to be honest, because 865 in there is more than enough capable of handling 1080p 240. Now for this ultra-wide video, you can see that the field of view on the S20 is definitely quite a bit better. But if you take a look at the HDR, that too is obviously quite a bit better on the S20. It's able to expose the shadows and maintain the highlights much better than the Mi 10 could possibly hope for. Okay, now for some pretty dark and teal-lit videos for ultra-wide, and I have to say the S20 overall looks better, especially in the shadows, but the colors, man, I don't know what happened in the S20, it's completely blue, where the Mi 10 actually represents the right colors. Now I did want to talk about the Pro Video mode we have on both of these devices. The S20 has a pretty good Pro mode. You can adjust exposure, ISO and whatnot, but when you try to zoom out to the ultrawide, you can't. You're also stuck to up to 4K 60, you have no 8K when you're in Pro mode. These honestly are pretty bad limitations because Pro mode is all about customization and personalization, right? And not having these options are pretty bad. But when you go over to the Mi 10, man, that thing is unbelievable in the Pro mode. It not only has everything that the S20 has to offer, but it also adds in histograms, a movie frame which is a 21:9 aspect ratio, and the ability to shoot log. That is just amazing. And that's not all. We also have the ability to shoot 8K when in Pro mode. That way you can adjust your settings to your heart's content. And if that wasn't enough already, we also have the option to switch over to the ultra-wide when in Pro mode. I mean, this is the most fully fledged Pro mode that I've ever seen. Hell, you even have the option to use a macro lens for whatever reason if you want it. But honestly, I definitely prefer the Pro mode on the Mi 10 than on the S20 by far. Alright, so definitely the Mi 10 has a lot to show for itself, especially in the videos department, than it did in the images. I obviously feel that the S20 is a lot more balanced in terms of features and quality, but the Mi 10 has quite a few tricks up its sleeve. I would call, on a general basis, that this would be definitely a tie between the two, but for my personal preference, I would pick the S20 because overall, it gives a better image quality in most cases, because I don't think a lot of people will use 8K, and neither will majority of the people be using Pro mode to dial in the settings every single time they want to take a video. So for that very reason, I actually prefer the S20 because when in auto mode, it gives much better results. But otherwise, I definitely think that the Mi 10 has a lot more potential when it comes to professional videography from the smartphone. So the video comparison was definitely a lot closer than the photo comparison was. So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be seeing you guys later. Cheers.